This episode is sponsored by Audible. Get a free audiobook of your choice that you get to keep with their free trial. You can learn more at lutherancartographer.com/audible. The Lutheran Cartographer, episode 78. Welcome to the Lutheran Cartographer, the podcast where we explore what it's like to be Lutheran in different places. I'm your host, Nicholas Weber. It's good to be back with you. Thanks for being patient with me during my hiatus. I've been moving out to St. Louis to start a new position at Concordia Publishing House, as well as going on a Boundary Waters trip. So it's been a busy couple months, and good to be back speaking with you. Today we are going to Paducah, Kentucky to talk to Pastor David Appold of St. Paul Lutheran Church there. Pastor Appold, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be on with you.
Help orient us geographically. We're in Kentucky in Paducah. Where is that?
Yeah, Paducah is probably the westernmost city in Kentucky. It's not the westernmost place in Kentucky, but as far as cities go, it is far western Kentucky. It's right on the Ohio River. So across the river from me, you're into Illinois. We're about 2.5 hours to the east of St. Louis and a little bit north, but about 3 hours, between 2.5 and 3 hours west of Nashville. So kind of on that line between Nashville and St. Louis. Paducah is kind of right in the center there.
I see. Okay. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you live before you came to Paducah, and how did you come there?
Yeah, I have been a Michigan native not my whole life, but almost my whole life. I am the son of a Lutheran Missouri Synod pastor, and his first call, my dad's first call, was to the wheat fields of Saskatchewan, Canada. And I was born there. People ask me if I'm a dual citizen, and I'm not. I'm a full-blooded American citizen, but we were there, I think, just for maybe 2 years. I have no memories of Canada. And then a couple of different places in Michigan. We were in a little city called Munger, Michigan, which is in the thumb of Michigan, a farming community there. And I really grew up in Lansing, Michigan, which most of your listeners, I think, will know Lansing. That's the capital. From there, I went to Concordia. My undergrad was at Concordia University in Ann Arbor. Met my wife there. We got married after we graduated. And right after we got married, we moved to Fort Wayne, Indiana, and seminary there for 2 years. Vicarage was back in Michigan, to Hillsdale, Michigan, as a vicar. And then I was sent to Paducah, Kentucky. I was expecting Michigan, but I'm glad that God sent me here to Paducah. It's a good place to be.
Excellent. Tell us a little bit more about the contrast between Kentucky and Michigan. What are some of the differences you've noticed?
Sure. There are a little. People ask me about the accent. Usually, that's what they'll ask me. Whether it's people here ask me where I'm from, they can hear a little more of the nasal Michigan, kind of that upper Midwest accent in my voice. I tell them I don't have an accent. It's them who have it. And you have a little bit of the southern, kind of what you would think of as a southern accent here in Paducah, but it's not pronounced. We're not deep south. And so you don't have the really pronounced southern drawl, which is wonderful, I think, when you hear it. But you do notice it a little bit. So you get a little bit of a difference in just the way people speak. Y'all is frequently heard, and that's a joke. I think the first time I said that in a sermon, my whole congregation said, "Pastor, now you're one of us." But the other things, just kind of in the way, the general demeanor of people, there is a little more of a laid back approach to things here. It's not laziness, but it is just a little bit slower life. People want to talk. They want to, they want to ask you about family, and I guess part of that is just a general kind of niceness that exists here, and that's not different than in Michigan. But there is a bit of a southern charm aspect to Paducah, Kentucky. And maybe some of that is Paducah is not a big city. There's in our county, I think there's about 60 to 70,000 people. Paducah is the big city in the county and in the western part of Kentucky. But even in Paducah, I think our population is somewhere around 40 to 50,000 people.
I see. Tell us about what are some of the best things about Paducah. We've already started to touch on kind of that southern charm and hospitality. What would you say are some of the best things about the area?
Yeah, I think some of the best things, I think the winters here I love better than Michigan. I didn't mention the differences, but obviously you get some of the, due to being further south, you have hotter summers and longer summers, more humid summers. But one of the things I love here is not just that there's no snow in the winter, but in the spring, like from kind of middle of February through April, there's so many more colors. So in Michigan, certainly you have a spring season, you get all 4 seasons there, but I don't remember it being so colorful. And down here you have dogwood trees, you have you have azaleas, you have a lot more of colors that come out in the springtime. It's not just that things are green, it's green and red and white and pink and purple and all kinds of beautiful colors.
I see. What are some of the challenges about being in the area?
Challenges of being in Paducah, are you thinking like specific to being at a Lutheran church, being a Lutheran pastor, or just in general?
No, in general.
Okay. Paducah is, I mentioned this before, Paducah is kind of the big city in Western Kentucky, but there's not a lot of industry in Western Kentucky. So it's farming. It's in the region around Paducah is primarily agricultural farming. There used to be a very large employer here called USEC. So Paducah was, some people might know Paducah as, I think one of the nicknames is Atomic City. I see that around here a little bit. The USEC plant was enriching uranium for a long time. And that has that the plant is still open and employs some people, but not on the level that it used to. And you can think of kind of the major world events that have led us not to have, there's just not as high of a demand for enriching uranium. And I think it also became a more efficient process for that in the last, 30 years or so. So you just don't need as many of these plants. What that means is there's not as many employers. So big employers in Paducah, there's 2 hospitals here. There is a paper mill kind of west of Paducah. But the major employer is no longer here. And there hasn't been, I don't think there's been a big replacement. There's other things that have come in, but major employers are not what they used to be.
I see. So last week or 2 weeks ago, we talked to a pastor in Eastern Tennessee, and was seeing some of the effects of the economic withdrawal. Do you see some of those in Paducah as well, whether it's the opioid epidemic or other things, or is it not quite that pronounced?
We have that. There certainly are. There's drug problems. There's project housing. There's difficulties like that. It's not as, I wouldn't say it's as pronounced as like when you hear of opioid crisis and especially Eastern Tennessee. You've got the Appalachia, and I don't think we have quite as big of a challenge with economic withdrawal, because even though I said the USEC plant is no longer here, there are other employers.
Okay, that makes sense. So what's it like to be Lutheran there?
Being a Lutheran in Western Kentucky, you're definitely in the minority, which is probably true just about anywhere in the country. But it certainly is we are not the primary drivers of Christian culture in this part of the world. If you think of Kentucky as part of the Bible Belt, you certainly have stronger Baptist and Church of Christ, to some extent Methodist influences are much stronger than Lutheran ones. So it's a little bit lonely. At the same time, I say that in Paducah, there's quite a few Catholic. There's a strong Catholic community around here. So there is a St. Mary Catholic school system here, and so you do have. It's not just Protestant. You do have a pretty good representation of Catholics in the area.
I see. So when you talk about how Lutherans don't shape the Christian culture around you as much as these other larger bodies do, would you say that the culture at large we're in Western Kentucky, is kind of has a Christian ethos? Is it sort of more of the sort of I'll be a good person, but I don't need to go to church kind of idea? What exactly is the sort of culture at large in your area like?
Yeah, sure. There's certainly not as Lutherans. You have a much more robust and richer understanding of the sacramental life, and that's not going to be a major factor here. But there is, in the air, there is a sense of going to church. That church attendance is important. Church is not just that's not just something for your grandparents to do. I'm not saying that that's like the majority of people, but there are still sort of vestiges of church being at the center of life. Let me give you one example. So many of the Baptist and Church of Christ churches historically have Sunday morning worship, Sunday evening worship, and then Wednesday night church. And so the school systems, the athletic teams, at least when I first got here, that was still kind of understood that Wednesday night is church night. Now, I think that I've seen just in 7 years that's really not a compelling thing for people anymore. So the Christian shaping of the culture in Western Kentucky, it's there to some extent. There's conservative Christian kind of values, but I think it's losing a lot of its real pull on people.
I see. What do you think the cause of that is?
I think a big cause of it is that there's not necessarily the conviction that used to be there. So, Wednesday night is not going to be. We're not going to have. We're not going to have practices or games on Wednesday night. But does that mean that people are going to church on Wednesday night because they want to hear God's word or they want to worship the Lord? Probably not. It just means Wednesday night is an off night. And, the same thing happens then on Sunday morning. And especially with the last year and all of the kind of the closures of things that have happened due to COVID and how that's influenced churches and churches being closed and being severely reduced. Now, how many people are going to be coming back? I think, a lot of people will, but it's not. There will also be some and maybe even many who are just going to say, I kind of liked being at home on Sunday morning. I don't need to go there anymore.
Yeah, that's an interesting issue that we're going to have to tackle as time goes on. Let's take a moment for a word from our sponsor. Folks, if you like podcasts, you will enjoy Audible. It's a service that gives you an audiobook to listen to each month of your choice from a large library. And they want to get you started with a free trial offer that includes an audiobook that you get to keep. So go to lutherancartographer.com/audible to get your free audiobook and start your free trial today. If you're not sure what book to check out, I'd recommend taking a look at Pastor Brian Wolfmueller's Has American Christianity Failed? Pastor Wolfmueller was a guest on episode 9, and his book on American Christianity goes through the various pitfalls that you see in big box churches as well as American evangelicalism in general. Well worth checking out. Start your free trial today at lutherancartographer.com/audible. Let's get back to our guest. Let's go on and talk about what it's like to raise a family there.
Sure. Paducah, I have 4 children, and a 5th one on the way. My wife is due in September.
Congratulations.
So, yeah, thank you. Paducah we've loved raising our kids here. My first son was born on Vicarage when I was in Michigan, but the rest are Kentucky babies. And in Paducah, you have a very, I think, a good, there's plenty for families to do. There's quite a few parks in the area. I mentioned there's a Catholic school. There's also a non-denominational school called Christian Community Academy, and some of our church members go there. But there's also a strong homeschool contingent in Paducah, and our family homeschools our kids, and there's quite a few in our church who do as well. So we host a little weekly homeschool co-op, and so there's a good community of of parents and children, especially in that homeschool group that we're tapped into, anyways.
That's great. Is Kentucky pretty friendly towards homeschooling?
Yeah, Kentucky is very friendly. This was kind of all new to us. This last year was the first year that we started homeschooling, and so we didn't know. You hear different stories about how, well, you've got to keep so many records, and you've got to be ready for them to come and visit you and make sure that you're keeping your kids on track. And thankfully, not that we would fear that, but it is much nicer to not always have somebody kind of checking in on you, and just to have the freedom to say, okay, we sent in our paperwork at the beginning of the year, and we're by and large kind of left alone. There's not a lot of interference into homeschooling here.
That's good. Let's talk now about the area. What if you had a friend coming into town? What would you say? You got to go check this out. Places to eat, things to do. What would you say? You got to go see this.
Yeah, I think Paducah is a river town. So I said at the beginning, it's right on the Ohio River, and I think I would want to show someone, okay, we got to drive downtown and see the riverfront area there. So Paducah is very much shaped by the river. I didn't mention this before, but probably the other major employer is barge companies. Okay, so a lot of people work on the river, and so you'd want to go downtown, down Broadway, and drive down and see the river. After there was a big flood here in 1937, the Ohio River flooded way up into the city. And after that, they've built flood walls that have murals now painted on them. So it's always fun to walk along the river there and to see all the murals that have been painted on the flood wall. And then just on the other side, on the quote unquote dry side of the flood wall, there's quite a few restaurants downtown. One that I really enjoy is called Kirchhoff's. It's a deli and a bakery. So going down there for lunch is always a fun thing to do, and to get a cookie afterwards right at Kirchhoff's, which has historically the family has a connection to St. Paul's. So when you go into the deli, you can look on the wall and you'll see baptismal certificates, and I think there's a confirmation certificate and maybe even a marriage certificate, all in German from way back in the day when the great-great-grandfather or whoever it was, Frank Kirchhoff, was baptized at St. Paul's.
That is really neat. So how long has the church been there?
Our congregation was was kind of officially established in 1868. They had been meeting before that, but that's when it was officially, there was a constitution that was then signed, was in May of 1868. So a couple years ago, 2018 was the 150th anniversary. Originally, I think the story goes that German immigrants were coming down the Ohio River, and the goal was to get closer to St. Louis and to Perry County to kind of hook up with those early Missouri Synod folks who were there in Perry County. But the river froze here, and so they couldn't keep going, and they planted some crops. Lo and behold, the crops grew well, and so they said, hey, let's just stay here. And then, kind of first order of business, let's establish a congregation.
I see. Any other sites or places to eat that we haven't covered?
Yeah, Kirchhoff's is the deli. There is a kind of a newer place that's very good called the Freight House, which I forget the name of the chef. She was on one of these reality TV shows. I think her name is Sarah. Oh gosh, now I've said it, but I can't remember her last name. But it's kind of a local, farm to table kind of a restaurant, and that's a very good place to eat in town here. There's a number of other places to go. Maybe if you wanted something kind of unique to Western Kentucky, certainly barbecue is a favorite here. So there's a couple of different barbecue places that a person would want to visit. There's one in town called, the one that I like to go to, I'll give you that one, is called Harned's, and that one's a little bit outside of town, but you get a very good pulled pork sandwich out there.
Nice. Good deal. All right. Anything else about Paducah that we haven't said, or about your congregation's history that you'd like to tell us about before we ask our closing questions?
Well, I mentioned the flood. That I think had a big impact on the history of Paducah and also of our congregation. So the flood was in 1937, and at that point, our church was on 4th Street. So the river, if you think of it in terms of a grid, a city grid, the river would essentially be 0 Street. So you're going up city blocks. So we were 4 blocks up from the river. And after the flood, the church building was damaged to such an extent that they really said, we own this other property out on 21st Street. So that's 21 blocks up from the river. And even though it had flooded out here, they didn't have as severe of flooding. So they moved the church building from 4th Street. They built a new church on 21st Street, which is the current building that we're in. And I think it's a great story because it's a beautiful church that was built, if you can think of this, right after a flood and during the Great Depression. But they built a very beautiful sanctuary and church that's continues to serve us well. And the sacrifices that I'm sure were made are quite. I think it's incredible and a great testimony to the faith and the importance that those congregation members said. This matters. We've got to build a good, solid church that's going to last for years.
That is really cool. As we start to close out the podcast, I want to make sure to give you the opportunity to point our listeners where you'd like. Your church's website, places to follow you online. Where'd you like to send our listeners?
Sure. Our church has a website, St. Paul Paducah. That's STPAUL. And Paducah is spelled PADUCAH.org. You can also find us on Facebook. Just search for the same thing. Or if you'd like to, we put our sermons up on YouTube, and every once in a while we'll have some other event. We'll have some other speakers who will come and we'll record, and we try to make all those things available on YouTube. We also have a podcast channel for our sermons, and so if you search again St. Paul Paducah in your whatever podcast app you're using, I think it should come up.
Okay, great. Thank you for your time today, Pastor Appold. What are your parting thoughts for our listeners?
Parting thoughts, I would say being in Western Kentucky certainly was not that was not in my plan for how my life would unfold or where I would be. But lo and behold, God's plans are better than our plans, and my family and I absolutely love it here. If you're ever in Western Kentucky, come on down to St. Paul's. We'll be happy to have you here, and happy to always find other Lutherans who are traveling through. It's always great, Nick, to see how no matter where you are or where you come from, the things that we have in common in Christ and in our shared confession really do unite us in a deeper way than even these other cultural things, which are great and are nice, but the deeper things of Christ are what really give us a common heritage and a common future too.
Absolutely. Thank you again. God's peace.
Yeah, thank you. My pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Lutheran Cartographer. For more about the things that we talked about today, check out the show notes page. That'll be at lutherancartographer.com/78. Next week, I'm going to talk a little bit about my decision to take the position at Concordia and talk about a little bit about the decision to move to St. Louis. And if you're interested in that Audible offer that we talked about earlier, you can find out more information at lutherancartographer.com/audible. Until next time, I'm Nicholas Weber. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you soon.